This is a Tracking the Tropics update with the certified most accurate weather team at First Coast News.
Hi there, I'm meteorologist Robert Spetta.
And I'm meteorologist Lee Southwick. Thank you for joining us for this month's episode of Talkin Tropics. And, you know, Robert, there's a lot to dive into today. The last time we did this, we were, I don't know if I want to use the word defending, but we were talking about how it was an active season and we had just gotten a lot of questions about, I thought you guys said it was going to be active. Why isn't it that active? Since then, we have had two major hurricanes impact our area alone. It has been an absolutely devastating past several weeks. We've also seen a lot of resilience and a lot of community, but there's unfortunately a little bit more of hurricane season to go. So today we're just going to kind of look back at what has happened since our last episode and look ahead to the rest of the season.
Yeah, and we're also going to touch on what's kind of maybe out there at this time here in late October, heading into November. And of course, that hurricane season is still ongoing. But my goodness, this past month has been busy, to say the least. We had, of course, Hurricane Helene and Milton. And, you know, both of us covering those storms from different angles. We're going to share our experience. First, I want to talk about, if you are watching this on Facebook or YouTube, make sure you also watch us on the First Coast News app. That is FCN Plus. We're going to be trying to stream these there more and more often. And if you have that app ready to go, you also get push notifications when you get those hurricane or tropical warnings in your local area here. It doesn't just have to be on the First Coast, but across the country. Not to mention, we also have Hurricane Central there where we keep you posted on the latest updates on those storms and information. So we appreciate wherever platform you're watching on, but we also really highly encourage you to go check out FCN Plus. Putting a lot of work. We got a lot of new things coming in with that app. They're going to help get that information out there better and make it safer for you. It's not about hype. We just also want to get that information out there and keeping you safe. So, Lee, let's first touch on here when we're recording this. It is October 30th. We got an area out there in the tropics we're keeping an eye on.
So this is an area that we've been watching for a long time, more than a week. I feel like close to 2 weeks now. It's something that the models have been showing the possibility of a low pressure system developing in the Caribbean. And so now the National Hurricane Center also highlighting it for a medium chance of development. And it's still holding at medium. It's possible that we could have a tropical depression form over the weekend, but the models are all over the place on where this is going to go or even how strong it's going to be. And so there's still some uncertainty, or really a lot of uncertainty with this system. Now, Robert, I will say, as of this recording, when it comes to the First Coast, there's no immediate concerns for us, but it's something that we are still watching very closely. Those waters are still very warm out there in the Caribbean, still an environment conducive for development.
Yeah, and the energy is there. I mean, these are well above average, by the way, for late October, which we mentioned in our last one. We kept saying the sea surface temperatures are very warm. So there is still that potential for additional development. Now, as you mentioned, the First Coast, thankfully for us, we do have this kind of high pressure ridge, dry air filtering in and across our area. So if anything does develop down towards the south, more than likely that a high pressure ridge will keep it south. That doesn't mean places like Jamaica, Cuba, the Bahamas, even parts of Mexico are spared from any development coming in out here. In fact, this is the GFS model kind of indicating something potentially over the Yucatan out there, Lee.
Yeah, and so it's just something to keep in mind because this time of year, a lot of people take cruises down to the Caribbean or any of those tropical vacations. So it's something to keep an eye on, even if we're saying right now for the First Coast, we're not too concerned. If you have any of those vacations coming up, I know I am one of them. I try to go to warm weather the second it gets cold here, and we're starting to get those cold fronts in, which are great because they, again, push those tropical systems away from us. But a lot of people try to head towards the Caribbean, so it's just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and this is the other thing with long-range model guidance. I do also want to continue to stress a high amount of uncertainty. Lee, I love social media. I like the people that are out there sharing stuff. But have you seen just a big uptick on people, especially with these latest storms and the long-range model runs kind of showing, 350 hours out saying a hurricane's coming to Florida?
It's dangerous, really. You don't want people to be frightened ahead of time when there's no concern and there's no need to be concerned. And yes, unfortunately, the miscommunication on social media, I mean, you and I could talk for hours about that. But just with what you're saying about the models themselves, yes, these models go out hundreds of hours into the future, and there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to that. We will see one model showing a landfall in Miami and the next one showing it in Houston. So that's why you cannot grab on to those models and take it as gospel as what's going to happen that far in advance. And that's why you never see your First Coast News weather team ever posting those single model runs that far out. We're always going to show you something like what's on the screen right now, Robert, where we compare the models and show you possible outcomes, and then we give you the main headline, which is whether there's uncertainty in the forecast. We know it's going to potentially form in the Caribbean, and then from there, where's it going to go? So I see right now you're showing us the European versus GFS model.
Yeah, the European, I like to call these the SpaghettiOs. I noticed that somebody actually asked this morning in one of our comment section, which, by the way, you're watching this live. Thank you. You are amazing. We're taking questions live here. Somebody asked earlier this morning, when did the spaghetti models come out? And spaghetti, and I think they're actually specifically referring to those single lines. Now, those don't really start to come out until the National Hurricane Center designates an area as an invest, which we don't even have at the time. We have moderate chance, but an invest. And the models and from the agencies, they specific zoom in on a low pressure area, and you get kind of a little bit of a high resolution type of data here. Right now, we're just strictly comparing here the guidance from the GFS and the ECMWF, and what we look for is them to kind of agree and match up. And into the long range, this does show kind of a weak low maybe in the Caribbean, which goes back to, that chance of something developing. But I like this graphic here, Lee. One of my favorite ones in explaining long-range models. You ever watch, Plinko? Or like in Japan, a big game is called pachinko. I still see it around here. But basically, the higher up you are, you drop this little circle down, it goes down, bounces around. But I think the long-range models are quite a lot like this. You're talking about 300 hours out. It still has a wide range to happen here. And this is why people are they're saying, oh, hey, 2 weeks out, why can't you tell me what's going to happen? Because a small deviation in the atmosphere can make a drastic change in the long-range forecast, chaos theory. And that is the case when we're talking about these models. A small deviation, especially when we don't even have an organized low, can make a drastic change in that long-range outlook. So why, we say a moderate chance in that long-range forecast at this time. Still could be anything changing here. Maybe if a low forms a little further towards the north, further towards the south, if it strengthens more rapidly, a pocket of warm air. These are all things that this graphic kind of indicates to you that can change that extended forecast out there, Lee.
And I do want to give, a nod to how much better the models have become over the past, even just couple of years, but really, if you just look back at our career, how much better they've become. But this is still something to keep in mind. So yes, 2 weeks out, we can tell you, we think something might be forming. That's fair, but exactly where it's going to go, as Robert just showed you, we can't tell you because there's still a lot of variables. Things could change, but at least we do now know that we have something to watch over a week or two, and so at least we get that little bit of heads up, and models are only getting better and better as well.
And without the models, because I think people lean, especially I love everybody that's interested in weather, but people that may have not studied meteorology, they lean too much on the models. And one thing we often look at is climatology. So this time of year, if you see something develop in the Caribbean and heading throughout the month of November, more than likely they're going to get picked up by the jet stream, sheared and pulled towards the north. 2 years ago, we had Hurricane Nicole, right? And that just skirted the coast and then it made landfall across central Florida. But the point is, it was kind of moving on a south to north trajectory, which this time of year, this is kind of what you see out there. It is not quite what you would see with, we had so many storms actually out into the Big Bend area this year. If we had anything in the Gulf, they would more than likely come from the southwest towards the north and east. So climatology, definitely important. And our next named storm system, by the way, would be Patty. I want to take a moment, though, here, Lee, and let's talk about the two names on there that jump out to us. Milton and, of course, Helene here. We had a bunch of other ones sprinkled in there in the middle of that list.
What a crazy season, just looking at that and all the hurricanes on that graphic.
You know what jumps out to me? We have two major four, excuse me. Goodness, I'm just counting them off. 4 major hurricanes On average, we get 2. A major, by the way, being defined as that Category 3 or higher. We got a 4 and a 5 in there. We have multiple major hurricanes this season, which goes back to the warm sea surface temperatures and everything. Let's.
I have the numbers real quick if you want. So normally, by this time of year, we have only 13 named storms, and we've already had 15. You can see there. Normally, we usually only have 6 hurricanes. We've had 10 so far, and by October 28th, the major hurricane number ticks up to 3, but we had 4 well before then. So just an insane season so far.
It's been busy. And I think that at least for the First Coast, we had a Dahlia start off the year that impacted. It made landfall in the Big Bend area, which another landfalling Big Bend storm.
Last year?
This year, excuse me.
This year we had Debbie.
Dahlia.
I know they're all.
Hey.
It's been a long couple of years.
Oh goodness! But I guess what Dahlia and Debbie stand out because they have very similar track.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's why they're kind of getting mixed up with those two because they both ran right over Perry, Florida. Shout out to Perry for just being the hurricane magnet. If hurricanes move there, and Steinhatchee, goodness gracious. But also Helene and Milton, and me and you, Lee, we both, of course, covering the storm here for First Coast News. You were in the studio, and I was out there in Tallahassee. First, I want to hear from you, Lee, about, covering this storm in the studio. What was kind of the feeling throughout Helene, as we're watching that storm system come on shore there, headed towards Tallahassee, Panhandle, Big Bend area? I
mean, you were here too before you left. Just there were nerves. We knew this was going to be a huge system, a huge storm heading towards Florida, and it was going to impact parts of our area. And then while we were here just trying to stay on top of it, oh my goodness, we are on the dirty side of the storm, which we're going to talk about. The power outages, what are these max wind speeds? They're getting worse. And so it was it's in the moment, you have to do your job and you have to get the information out and make sure you're helping give people information that helps them stay safe. And then after, it was sad to just think back on the devastation that we saw, the damage we saw, our friends out to the west of Jacksonville too. And Robert, you were in Tallahassee for this storm. What did you experience?
Well, that's videos stuff I shot there. Just shout out to the Double out there for putting us up. And, it was a big wet washing machine in Tallahassee. We were nervous a bit at first because it was expected to come on shore as a full-on Cat 4. Could have been the strongest storm to ever hit the Tallahassee area. But you know what ended up happening, and we often see this with tropics.
With a certified most accurate weather.
When we're talking about winds at Cat 4 status, it's usually a tiny little slice of the eye wall around that center of circulation. So there's a broader range of impacts. Tropical storm strength winds extend well away from the center, heavy rainfall, but it's that inner slice. And what happened at the last second was that storm wobbled a little bit east, and that inner slice came on shore just around Perry there, rolled off, and after the storm actually traveled to places like Live Oak, Madison County, where they got much more damage than Tallahassee did. Widespread power outages. My goodness, Lee, Waycross, Georgia, just started school about a month after the storm made landfall because there was such widespread damage and devastation there from Helene. And that is not to mention the fact that storm system also carried over towards the Carolinas, which, this is kind of a crude analogy, Lee, here, but I often tell people when they say, what happened with the Carolinas? That storm was moving fast, right? And all the moisture from it really, and the way I compare it is like, imagine if you had a bag of water and you poked a little hole in the bottom of it, and then you just started running. And as you're running, little water's coming out. And of course, we saw some pretty heavy rainfall in Florida. But imagine you just run with that bag of water straight into a wall and it burst. That's what happened with the Appalachian Mountains in this storm system. It was a bag of water running it straight into the mountains, and it burst as that uplift took place, and we had that orographic lifting. It squeezed that moisture out, and boy, it caused cause that serious flooding out there.
And that, the hurricane just shows you all the different ways a hurricane can be destructive or devastating, because we had, places like Perry and Steinhatchee. So starting with like Steinhatchee, you have the storm surge, and then inland Lake City, Waycross, Blackshear, those places with the widespread power outages, the wind, and then you have the fresh water, the rain, which absolutely devastated parts of the Carolinas and Tennessee. So just multiple ways a hurricane can be devastating and deadly, inland and right at the coast.
I also do want to touch in on, by the way, I forgot I had this graphic up here. You were just talking about those numbers. So there you go. It is, an above average hurricane season. It's very active. And with that said, Milton being the other one that spun up here in the Gulf of Mexico, went from west to east, which, by the way, this is something I saw, and we had to debunk this a few times here, Lee. How common is it for a storm to move from the west to the east in the Gulf of Mexico towards Florida?
How common is
it? Is it uncommon?
No. Do you see? Well, do you have that graphic with all of those landfalling hurricanes
for
the Gulf Coast?
I do not think I do. Actually, the only one I have is from Kate in November 21st.
All right, you know what? Yeah, you take it away. You're running the graphics. You're doing a great job, by the way. So you go ahead.
Hey, we're just kind of, this is live, and we're trying to get these graphics all lined up here.
How exciting, by the way, that we're doing this live for the first time. This is awesome. Thank you everyone for joining us.
If you're just tuning in now, I do want to say once again, thanks for watching live. We are taking questions on Facebook and YouTube. Also, make sure you watch us live on the First Coast News Plus app. Can't stress it enough. It's a fantastic app. We got some new things coming in with it. That was our producer, our digital guy over here. He's been putting this all together. And if you go there, we also have...
Shout out Andy.
Andy's a legend. And we also got so much great information there, so you can check in on the tropical systems, not just when you're watching us live.
Right.
There.
That's why the app is such a great tool. You can get then you can go to Hurricane Central. You can get all the web articles, even just the local weather. If you're watching from the First Coast News viewing area and you say, what's the weather today in Jacksonville or St. Augustine, it's right there on your app.
So let's also talk about Milton here, which, that storm system spun up. And that one, it's a different track. Coming across central Florida and extending off towards really running right up the I-4 corridor. That one, I noticed, Lee, the core of the winds, much more evident, because I noticed a lot of people in Jacksonville said the winds were less here than during Helene. What was your experience in the studio with that one?
They were right. The winds were more intense with Helene, and I think that has a lot to do, again, with when we talked about being on the dirty side of a storm versus not. That hurricane, its hurricane force winds were a little bit tighter to the center, really followed close to I-4, as Robert Spetta said. And so here in Jacksonville, a lot of us were spared when it came to those strong winds, but we had other issues. I mean, St. Augustine, with the storm surge, with the heavy rain, the farther south you went, we had worse impacts. So with Helene, it was to the northwest, and with Milton, it was to the southeast. Also, north of Jacksonville, places like Fernandina Beach, they got an evacuation order, not mandatory, but still they were watching the storm surge there too. So another major hurricane that didn't make direct landfall here on the First Coast, but still impacted parts of our areas, and also in very different ways.
Yeah, and in these videos is actually I shot. This is a drone shot over at Flagler Beach, where they did get hurricane strength winds. We were getting 100 mile per hour wind gust along the coast. Naturally, that's going to rip somebody's roof off. It also was just the fact that we had persistent onshore winds for several days. So we did see some tidal flooding and surge flooding there from that storm along Flagler Beach. And I noticed, though, like when we were live on the air during that storm, it was absolutely going. It was raging. But then I would hear in my ear, you guys, some people around Jacksonville area, they're like, it's a little windy. And it goes back to that core of the storm and why we always say the worst of the weather is that inner eye wall. If you get hit by that, it is night and day. And it also goes back to the fact that Jacksonville has not really gotten a hurricane since Dora in the 60s. trivia here for you, Lee. And guys, if you're watching this right now, let me know. Let's hear the answer. What you think here? Trivia: what band played right after Hurricane Dora, and the drummer had to nail down their drums because it was too windy?
Okay.
Extra points if you got the drummer.
So I do know the answer, but do you want to wait till the end so people can comment and give us the answer?
So if you guys comment. I'll get a couple answers here on the comment section, and then we'll give you the answer to this. Band that played right after Hurricane Dora. That was the last full-on hurricane we got in Florida, and what drummer for extra points had to nail down their drums?
Because it's at Gator Bowl, which is now Everbank.
It was at the Gator Bowl, yeah. Hey, and I point that out, and we'll go back to that because the fact that these storms we've dodged it in Jacksonville. We have not gotten sustained 74-mile-per-hour winds in the city. Sustained. That's on a 2-minute average since Dora. So we stress that in the fact that you may say you've been through a couple hurricanes this year, but you haven't. We haven't gone through them
tropical
yet.
Storm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Tropical storms.
That's so important to remember because we're not trying to diminish your experience, especially if you had damage. I mean, these storms are traumatizing, but we just don't want what we see. There's a problem with people saying, "Oh, I survived this major hurricane. I survived Milton or Helene or whichever storm you want to say." People here think about Irma or Matthew, and they say, "Yeah, I survived a hurricane and we were fine." And so we're not evacuating the next hurricane. Those were not direct landfalls. We did not have hurricane force winds ripping roofs off of houses widespread across the entire Jacksonville metro area. So unfortunately, when we say, you know what, let me restate this in a different way. Fortunately, we have not had a system like that in several years, but please don't let that get to your head and think that we are fine, we survived these hurricanes, because we have not actually experienced a hurricane like that since the 60s.
And then we're talking about Cat 1 status.
Right.
We're not talking about Cat 4, we're not talking about Cat 5, 1. So you're right. It's been a close call here. With that said, hurricane season's not over yet. This is looking all the way to the end of November. And you notice I flicked through this graphic a few times here. Apologize for that. My lineup's a little off. But the latest landfalling hurricane on record, it was in 1985 with Hurricane Kate out there in the Panhandle. That made landfall as a Cat 1 in 1985. Now, the last one was Hurricane Nicole on the 10th of November, back 2 years ago. With that said, though, Lee, we've only ever had 4 landfalling hurricanes in the month of November, not counting tropical storms, but full-on hurricane in the continental United States. So it's not common, but
it's still 4 too many, if you ask me.
It's not unheard of, and that's why the hurricane season goes all the way to the end of November. And I think, as we continue to see these sea surface temperatures well above average, which right now they're still in the mid-80s in the Gulf. In the future, this is not me hyping or being doomsday, but physically it is possible, if we still have sea surface temperatures out there in the 80s, for a storm system to be even after the end of November into December.
And that's also not unheard of. Occasionally we've had a named storm in December or January.
It's true.
So, and like you said, with these warm waters, I mean, and the warm waters are to blame for so much. We got a lot of questions during, especially Milton, when we saw it just rapidly intensify in the Gulf, and people said, how, why? Those waters were so warm and warmer than normal, and it just was fuel, an all-you-can-eat buffet for that hurricane. It just fueled up and exploded.
Hey, I do want to give a shout out to David Cognata. Hope I said your name right. He, I don't know if anybody on your stream got the answer already for the question, but he straight up answered it. You were the first one. You get a gold star, David.
Yeah, gold star. That's
the Beatles. The Beatles. The Beatles and Ringo Starr. I think I merged Beatles and Ringo together there. The Beatles, and it was Ringo Starr who had to nail down his drums right after Hurricane Dora in Jacksonville. Really famous event, and it was the only time the Beatles ever played in Jacksonville too. I think the state of Florida, and they wanted to be there so bad they played despite the fact that we were right on the backside of a full-on hurricane. It was flooded. There was damage.
And they still played.
Shout out to the Beatles.
While the president was there surveying the damage, the Beatles were playing.
Right.
No, I do want to give a shout out maybe when we circle back before we go, because we have a David Hansen who's watching on YouTube. He says, "Good morning, watching from Jamaica." And we were just talking about the Caribbean. So we'll circle back. Stay with us, David, as we go back to what's currently happening out there in the tropics right now.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that more in just a minute here. But yeah, thank you very much, because we're talking about the state of Florida, and we're talking about the southeast and how we're probably not going to get a tropical system. Jamaica and a good portion of the Caribbean definitely still in fair play for a tropical system here in the upcoming week. I'm not saying 100% it's going to happen, but you have a higher chance than we do up here into the state of Florida. And yeah, it goes back to, how about this right here, some of our tropical ingredients we've been talking about here, Lee. With, of course, the sea surface temperatures being well above average. We're over 80 degrees, 85, 86, even around the Western Caribbean. We need those low-level formation where we're starting to see abundant of moisture, but a lack of vertical wind shear, which as we get later on in the season, I think shear is increasing. Even today specifically, one thing you need, oddly enough, you need a high amount of shear for severe thunderstorms, things like tornadoes. And we are seeing a tornado outbreak likely taking place here in late October across the central U.S. But that's also a killer for hurricanes. So I think that the potential for additional storm systems definitely still possible here. And we go back to this right here, that moderate risk of development you were just talking about out here in the Western Caribbean here, Lee. What do you think at this time? What's kind of your thoughts for the rest of the season, if you want to just kind of sum it up?
For the rest of the season?
For the rest of the season.
Stay alert, because as we just talked about, we still have the ingredients out there needed, and especially with those warm waters, for tropical development. I do think it's not as scary as it was when we were in September and October, especially because we have these fronts moving through now. But still, you can't let your guard down until the end of hurricane season. And for reasons like that, there's still the possibility of development out there in the tropics. So you're doing the right thing by watching this already. You are staying engaged. You are staying informed. I just ask you to continue to do that through the month of November.
I think that is a great point. The fact you're watching this, you're just watching us talk. We don't even have a hurricane out there. You're watching us talk means you are staying informed and aware. I would highly advise you to also share, and of course I want you to share this. I want you to watch us on the FCN Plus app. Yeah, that's great. But also just talk to your neighbors, because I've seen so much in the age of social media. There are so much misinformation going around. If I believed if what transpired by every social media post I've seen over the past week took place, we would have gotten 5 hurricanes already in the last 3 days, because I've seen so much just out there outlandish stuff, and I get people are concerned. I get it. Yeah. People share what they see, but also there is some people who are just trying to get clicks. So if you are staying aware, you are getting that information from good sources. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. Be like, I don't think so. Maybe you should just check some official sources here and get that information. So you're staying smart, you're staying weather aware, and help out your neighbors and help out your friends, and make sure we're all being safe ahead of the storm, right, Hurley? That's
right. Like with the fact that Milton wasn't even gone yet. Robert, you were still out there in the thick of things in Flagler County, and I was getting messages on Facebook, which I'm glad, but saying, Nadine is coming. Nadine is taking the same path as Helene. Why aren't you talking about this, or what's happening? Well, thank you for coming to us, the weather team, to ask that question, because that was incorrect. And hopefully I helped calm some nerves with that. But like Robert said, unfortunately, there are some people on Facebook or whatever platform that just want to get clicks, and they spread misinformation. So thank you for coming to official sources, coming to groups like us, and the NOAA, National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center. Those official teams and websites and official Facebook pages too. You know, we'll always accept your Facebook questions and comments when it comes to what's out there right now and what's active. I don't want anyone to be scared or afraid for no reason. It's just not good for your health. And so I'm really glad that Nadine was not another Helene, but I can't imagine the fear that people had in order to come to our Facebook pages and ask about it. So,
and rightfully so. We're not saying your fear is unwarranted.
No, I just feel so bad that you felt that way for even if it was only 5 minutes. But that's why, we will always keep you updated with what we're watching. And we'll show you stuff like our tropical outlook and the models that what we see and what's uncertain. We will always be honest with you on that.
And I got a couple questions here. So first off, Jeffrey is watching from Brunswick, Georgia. He asked, his question is, how y'all doing this morning? We're doing fantastic. And it goes back to saying this is our first live Talking Tropics in our fantastic new studio that we got here, which is only getting improved. Shout out to our digital producer, Andy, behind the scene here. He's doing a fantastic job. And you know what? If you guys like this, comment. Say, I want more of this, or we can show our bosses, and we can get to do this more. So comment on here because we want to do this more.
We do. The dream would be to do this at least weekly. We love having this interaction with you guys.
Exactly. We love to talk to you guys. I love being able to read these questions live. So you comment, you get that engagement. Yeah, the powers that be get these things together. David also said, hey, I'm one of those people worried about the Caribbean. He says he's going on a cruise on November 3rd out of Jamaica and already paid for, so he's going to be hitting it. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be a hurricane on November 3rd, but the sea's probably going to be a bit choppy in the Western Caribbean. At the very least, you're going to have those thunderstorms around there. The good news, if it's not organized, typically we kind of get these thunderstorms flaring up across that area. In fact, I'm going to flip back through a couple of the graphics here. It's going to look a little funky at first, but basically, if you get those storms and you don't have that full-on development just yet, as long as the ship avoids it, and this goes back to my days in the Navy, the seas aren't all too bad. It's when you get that long fetch area, which we don't really have long fetch waves out there right now. We don't have big swells or anything like that. I wouldn't be too concerned as long as this doesn't develop. Now, if it does start to develop and then we get a storm that is kicking out the swells from it, that is going to make for it. The good news, a lot of these cruise lines, they have operational meteorologists that work for them. They can tell them where to go, where to stay safe. They want to make their money, so they're going to try to get you out there, but hopefully they take the path least avoiding of the seas. So I wouldn't be concerned. Have a good time on your cruise. Just just be aware that maybe one of the things I used to use in the Navy here, Lee, was it was like this little bracelet that had a thing on it.
It was like it pushed into your...
Yes!
Yeah.
And that actually got rid of the seasickness for me. That's... You know what I'm talking about. Lee's grew up on a boat. She knows how to deal with these seas.
I get seasick too, yes. So anytime when I go on a cruise as well down there, I always have the Dramamine on deck and stuff like that. Now, Robert, would you mind flipping ahead maybe just to the model comparisons too, just to take a look at what November 3rd is looking like?
That's a good idea.
Just to check.
All right, so first off, we got this one here. You can talk through it.
Okay, so let's see, Thursday, that would be tomorrow, or is that...
That would
8
be
days
next
out.
Thursdays.
Okay, now I see. So Friday, Saturday. So there you go. Over the weekend, maybe a little bit of development there in the Caribbean, trying to organize. This is the American model, the GFS model. So remember, it's just one of several models that we look at and use. But it did show that system trying to get its act together. Here we go. We can compare that GFS American model to the European model now. So the American model trying to show more organization than the European model is showing. And if it does organize, you're going to get, like Spetta said, some rougher seas out there. But to be honest, when you look at this, we can't say for sure because the models are having trouble really grasping what happened. The European says, not really much of a system. The GFS, and then we're not showing you the Canadian model here, but that's showing a little bit more development for parts of the Caribbean as it starts to lift north. I don't know where your cruise is going, but it looks like the low pressure system that's trying to form in the Caribbean would start to drift generally north or northwest, maybe closer towards the Gulf of Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula. So if you're going from Jamaica to Puerto Rico over to the Virgin Islands or anywhere like that, you're getting away from that system as well.
And yeah, actually, they did say they're going out to Grand Cayman. So
okay,
yeah, it just deep Caribbean. Look at some thunderstorms out there. Definitely. Thanks for your comment there, David, and I hope you have a fantastic
I'm jealous.
I want to also talk to Susan here. They said they found us an accident on Facebook, but they found us nonetheless. Now, Susan, if you're watching us on Facebook, make sure you download that First Coast News app too. She's out of Flagler, the Flagler area, which, Andy, I don't know if you could pop up some of the video from Milton again here, because, they were saying thank you for covering the storm during Milton there and some of the impacts out there. So they said keep covering it. And this was right there, Flagler Beach. Shout out to you guys in Flagler Beach. You're just you took some pretty decent impacts from the storm. I know there was some pretty decent damage, a lot of downed trees, flooding and everything. So if you found us by accident, you found us on by purpose, we appreciate you being here, and I hope that we continue to provide that valued information for you guys.
Yeah, and Robert, could you quickly again talk about just like what you experienced when you were in Flagler County during Milton? Because we were here safe in studio going to you live, and there was water trying to bubble into your hotel room.
Oh goodness, we were on the 7th floor. I've never seen that happen before. So the slider on the door, water got into that, being blown in. Then once the water accumulated inside that slider, every time a wind gust came through, it sounded like we had a water feature in the hotel. I thought at first it was like a pipe or something, and I looked at it and it's like I don't know how else to describe it, bubbling up.
We were worried for you and for everyone in Flagler County.
Oh goodness, it was rough. And we were in a very secure, sturdy building, but I felt for those that were on the beach, maybe not in a full-on secure building. The Flagler Beach, the government building right there on the coast, ripped right back. City Hall, that's the word I was looking for. The roof completely ripped off of that.
Oh, that's awful.
And it was some pretty decent impacts. For us, we were fine, but we were actually on the balcony covering the storm, and at one point I made the call like, nah, I'm going inside. So we, from like 2:30 to 3:30, 4 o'clock, we were just inside our hotel room reporting, because we want to bring and document stuff for you guys, but at the same time, we're telling people do not
safe.
be out in the storm. I don't want to be that one who is like, don't be out here. Ah!
Right. That's what you'll never see First Coast News holding on to a stop sign for dear life. I mean, that's why. And it's great. You knew you were a meteorologist on the ground, and then our other crews, they're constantly checking back in with the weather team that's here in studio to say, is it safe to be outside right now? We will never put our people in danger. We go through extensive training and communication. So when we say you need to stay inside and we're outside, we're helping them specific for one specific location, but please stay inside. And as Robert did the exact right thing and said, we are not going back out there in that. We're going inside into shelter and safety. So great job, Robert, covering that.
Well, thank you, Lee. And you guys in the studio did a fantastic job. And hopefully, the one thing I did notice in the studio is that this set was starting to get utilized during that. So it goes back to saying, if you download that First Coast app and watch our live streams, of course, linear TV is great. We're going to be on there. By linear TV, I mean watching Channel 12 and 25 in Jacksonville on First Coast News, ABC, NBC. But also we have these updates, which sometimes, we can have these active engagements. Both Lee and I, we got our phones in front of us. We're reading your questions and comments right now. So when there is a hurricane going on, no matter where you are, if you're on the First Coast, we love you. If you're outside the First Coast, I had a comment on here, somebody out from the Philippines, they're watching because they're interested in tropics. If you got those questions, we can answer them, and we can do it in real time, especially if you are worried and you want to know now, should I evacuate? We're not going to make that decision for you, but we will give the best information available for you during a storm system. So yeah, that's our goal here.
Absolutely. So again, you're doing the right thing by, even now while there's a lull for the First Coast, you're still staying informed. Please continue to stay informed. We unfortunately have a whole another month to go, all of November. Hurricane season does not end until the very end of November.
All right. Well, I'm meteorologist Robert Spetta.
I'm meteorologist Lee Southwick.
All right. Thanks for watching Talking Tropics, and hope to see you next time we put these out here. Don't forget to comment down below.